Distinct from the time of the Founding Fathers, we now live in a secular culture that is heavily influenced by Darwinism. Not only the evolution of species, but the evolution of truth, and a morality defined by individual choice, moral relativism.
And from that, we have increasingly come to view truth as simply a construct. Truth is not something that comes from outside of us, some established, divinely given moral truth through reason or the Bible. Truth is something people make up.
But starting a little over 100 years ago, maybe 150 years ago, the trend of intellectual thought was towards the concept of moral relativism.
Moral relativism means that there really is no final truth. Darwin believed that lower species evolved into higher species, and today, on the whole matter of truth, it is believed that absolute truth, moral truth, has evolved into choice. Today, truth is relative. There is no one truth, because Darwin removed the first cause, as it were. He removed God from the equation of creation. At least when our founders put together the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, they believed in the God of reason. They believed that there was truth that was beyond any of us. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. All have certain unalienable rights. That was natural law. It was something that everybody believed was established truth that could not be questioned.
I think we do ourselves damage if we deny that there are basic fundamental values, some of which may in fact be informed by religious values that shape, inform the way in which our society operates and ways in which our government operates.
Today, for many people, the concern is that these religious values that were supposed to underpin the morality expected of the limited state are in fact being eroded. And with such erosion comes the loss of freedom that they were to protect. With natural law now being questioned as the authority of our life together, collisions occur as we struggle to redefine or to recapture what our public moral law should be. These controversies are played out in our culture and in the courts. A high-profile example is the proposed new healthcare reform law, one which requires Catholic institutions to provide coverage for contraception, even though it violates their conscience.
Under the rule, women will still have access to free preventive care that includes contraceptive services, no matter where they work.
No one in the United States, no one, should ever be compelled by their government to choose between violating their religious beliefs and being penalized for refusing.
The issue here is forcing the church to provide it directly or indirectly in contravention of the church's teaching, and that's what we don't want to do. It's one thing when tax dollars pay for it, it's another thing when church dollars.
Actuaries have looked at this benefit. The Federal Employees Health Plan, when contraception was added to federal employees benefit, which is the largest employee group in the country, costed this as no cost, free, no cost, because adding contraception and having some employees take advantage of that coverage lowers the overall costs of the health plan.
So you're saying by not having babies born, we're going to save money in health care?
Providing contraception as a critical preventive health benefit for women and for their children reduces health.
Not having babies born is a critical benefit. This is absolutely amazing to me. I yield back.
Religious people on both sides of the aisle can agree or disagree on larger questions of health care, but both should be extremely distressed when the religious freedoms of anyone in America is threatened.
Dr. Mitchell. Over the last decades, new rules of navigation, as seen in the HHS mandate, have affected the relationship of the intersection of church and state, with new values being forced upon the church as well as upon free, religious American citizens. One case in 2012 went all the way to the Supreme Court.
The New York Times said of the Hosanna Taper decision that it was the most significant religious freedoms decision in decades.
The case involved a teacher at a church school of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod in Michigan. Considered a minister of the church, the teacher was granted a leave of absence to receive treatment for narcolepsy. When the school denied her request to return to work, she sued the church for violating her rights.
Instead of following the process laid out by the church for dispute resolution, she went to the EEOC and filed suit.
The church school planned to have her return in the fall, having contracted a temporary replacement for the rest of the school year. Bringing suits like these are contrary to the teaching of the church, but the real issue in this matter asked, how much can the government be involved in the selection or removal of ministers in the church? The case made its way through the courts until it was argued before the United States Supreme Court in October 2011. Douglas Laycock spoke on behalf of the church school.
The churches do not set the criteria for selecting or removing the officers of government, and government does not set the criteria for selecting or removing officers of the church. She could have had a hearing in the Synod before decision makers who would have been independent of the local church. This court has repeatedly said churches can create tribunals for the governance of their officers.
I think your point is that it's none of the business of the government to decide what the substantial interest of the church is.
Leandra Krieger from the United States Department of Justice argued on behalf of the government against the church school. She argued that the government could indeed limit religious freedom, even limit the First Amendment, as long as it was for the public good.
The freedom of religious communities to come together to express and share religious belief is a fundamental constitutional right, but it's a right that must also accommodate important governmental interests in securing the public welfare.
Is there anything special about the fact that the people involved in this case are part of a religious organization?
We think that the analysis is one that the court has elaborated in other cases involving similar claims to autonomy, non-interference.
Is that a no? You say it's similar to other cases, right?
We think the basic contours of the inquiry are not different. We think how the inquiry plays out in particular cases may be.
It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. We're talking here about the Free Exercise Clause and about the Establishment Clause, and you say they have no special application?
The Supreme Court ruled 9-0 for the congregation.
These legal skirmishes unfortunately contribute to the entrenchment of a lack of trust and prevent a healthy collaboration between the church and the state working together on a community level. But one thing is for certain. The Founding Fathers would have been very uncomfortable for the federal government to be the final arbiter of such things. So can the First Amendment work in the modern day? Can church and state work together?
Well, I think they can. Yeah, you just have to have, everybody has to kind of have an open mind.
So I think it could possibly work, but it's hard. It's hard to find that balance. So
I think that they're two completely separate categories, and I don't see a way for them to work together.
I think right now, I really do think we need the church. We need religion. We need some morals.
The fact of the matter is that church and state have a long history of healthy cooperation in very significant ways. They have intersected in the areas of education from grade schools to universities. They have worked together in public health care. Have you ever noticed that many hospitals still reflect their religious origins with names like St. Luke's, Jewish, Presbyterian, and the like? Adoptions, the placement of foster children in new homes, effective immigration services, and many other services are still performed by faith-based social service agencies for the sake of the public good. We have seen the spheres of church and state work particularly well for the betterment of human welfare, both domestically and around the world. An area where the church and state has a tradition of working well together is providing humanitarian relief.
We have 17 offices around the world, and Lutheran World Relief probably works in about 40 countries, and we're really proud of our partnership with the United States government.
Catholic Charities has a long history of working in partnership with the government. Today, our homeless services, our services to veterans, our services to the elderly in nursing homes and HUD-funded facilities is enormous all the way across the country. Almost every diocese in the country has some presence of Catholic Charities, and it depends on a partnership with government funding in order to make it work.
LIRS has an amazing record and history of extending welcome to newcomers in this land. It began in the period around World War II, when hundreds of thousands of people were displaced. And the leadership of LIRS and Lutherans in this country, with other people of faith, made a case to the U.S. government that we should be opening our nation to receive people displaced by war. As a result, hundreds of thousands of people who had been living in refugee camps in Germany, Italy, and Austria were allowed to come to this country. And so the ministry and service we carried out was one of welcome and hospitality. We take to heart the calling and the story of the Good Samaritan, God's command to love the neighbors that God gives to us, not just the neighbors that we choose.
As you might expect, sometimes there are challenges and problems when religious groups work together with the state.
In some places, Illinois particularly, has taken on the notion that they recognize gay marriages, and as such, foster care service providers have to also recognize gay marriages in the selection of foster care and adoptive parents. Well, obviously this was going to be difficult for Catholic Charities, and it's proven to be almost disastrous for us across the state of Illinois. Almost all of the Catholic Charities programs have now given up any foster care.
With the possibility of these sorts of collisions, why should religious organizations want to partner with the government or the government with religious organizations? Let's see.
The Church of the Nazarene in Collingdale, Pennsylvania, where a shipment has arrived in time for this week's family dinner. Low-income families come in for free groceries. Some stay and partake in a hot meal. At the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, there's an office for faith-based and neighborhood partnerships that oversees the state programs.
National Day of Prayer.
Director Max Finberg says it's permissible to mix faith and food assistance up to a point.
When you are required to pray in whatever tradition in order to receive food or to receive benefits, that crosses the line.
Finberg says churches and other houses of worship are so prevalent in America, they can deliver food to more places and at lower cost than government agencies.
They are the best distribution network one could possibly ask for.
Now, on the continent of Africa, the church and faith-based organizations are among the most trusted entities. I mean, people trust their Sunday school teachers, people trust their pastors, people trust their youth workers, people trust their deaconesses, people trust those volunteers working in local health dispensaries. And the United States government knows that and respects that. And to their credit, they find ways to channel money where it will make a positive impact.
The citizens of this great country decided that there are some people that have to be helped, some people that we have to care for. Always going to look at the children, the handicapped, those that are vulnerable, those that are sick. And the government does not have the resources, nor does it have, if you will, the mission to care for people in that way. Catholic Charities, Lutheran Social Services, Salvation Army, we the social service providers, our mission is to provide that care, to care for those people. It's a good match, it's a good partnership.
We have a strong relationship and partnership with the U.S. government, and particularly with government agencies that support the resettlement process. And they choose to partner with us as a faith-based organization because, one, they know we do the work well. Two, they know that we're grounded in local communities. And three, they know the story of congregations and faith communities extending welcome, standing with newcomers, and accompanying them through the long and sometimes difficult process of integrating into American society.
In our mind, you can't separate, and in our teachings and in our tradition, in our history, you cannot separate works of charity, acts of charity, from the Catholic Church any more than you could our sacraments. It's who we are, it's what we are. Part of being Catholic means to be of service to the community.
churches and faith-based organizations aren't just another service organization that comes and goes, that follows the dollars, that picks up and leaves and moves to new places to start new projects. Faith communities are ever present in local communities, rooted in those communities, a place of belonging and leadership in communities. And so the strength that partners like the U.S. government see in faith-based organizations in responding to human need here in the United States, including the needs of refugees and migrants, is because of those deep roots in the community, because of the respect of religious leaders and people of faith, because of the deep commitment to love our neighbor and to welcome the stranger.
Church and state began working together very early in our nation's history. In fact, they worked together during the Revolutionary War in the area of the military chaplaincy.
General George Washington saw great need and benefit to having military chaplains. It's important to have military chaplains for several reasons. The first is for the spiritual well-being of the service member and their families, particularly when you go in harm's way. There's nobody there except that chaplain to bring to you a word of comfort and hope. There's something to be said about faith-based pastoral care and counsel. It's different from what the world offers. Frankly, my personal experience has been that most soldiers, even those who are non-religious, at times of distress, want to hear something beyond the world's wisdom. They want to hear, what does it mean to be in a world where there's good and evil, and people die, and my friends die? How does God enter into that?
Intersections. While we may like to avoid them, they are an inescapable part of our lives as we move from one place to another. They're places where people are going in different directions. Sometimes they yield, and sometimes they take the right of way in order to safely navigate the intersection to get where they're going. It's not always easy. Sometimes there are collisions. It's the same at the intersection of church and state. At the intersection of the church and state, competing goals are negotiated. We've established that the Constitution did not provide for a wall of separation between church and state, but rather a protective barrier that limits the power of the federal government and unleashes the power of free, self-governing citizens to care for one another. Such a framework doesn't always provide for immediate solutions, but empowers the people to work together to make the best out of the broken world in which they live. The relationship between church and state is best described as an intersection. It's how we negotiate that intersection that is the key to a healthy society.
My goal is not a Christian America. My goal is a just America. I want an America that stands on justice, that fights for what is right, that upholds God's natural law. That would be quite fine. In fact, that's enough.
Government has a very important role, along with all of the church faith communities, to try to create what we would call the common good.
The state has to stay in its place and religion has to stay in its place. And this is what actually brought and led to, I believe, the greatest experiment of democracy on the planet, which is the kind of pluralism that we are allowed to experience here in the United States of America. The reason why United States of America is a place of democratic genius is because of the way we allow multiculturalism and we allow all of this wonderful, robust immigration and all of these different kinds of groups to live side by side. And that is because religion is in its place and the government is in its place.
We've seen a lot of collisions between church and state recently, but it doesn't have to be that way. Informed by Luther's teaching of the two kingdoms, we see that the First Amendment does not build a wall of separation, but provides a framework within which we can successfully navigate the intersection of church and state. I'm Gregory Seltz. Thanks for joining us.